What if I told you that a single man was responsible for one of the deadliest conflicts in human history? A chilling thought, isn't it? A single individual, Adolf Hitler, held the reins of power and steered our world into a devastating war that spanned continents. His notorious leadership unleashed a conflict so immense, its ripples are still felt to this day. But who was this man, and how did he come to orchestrate such a catastrophic event? This man was Adolf Hitler, the infamous architect of World War II. Our story begins in the aftermath of World War I, where a disgruntled veteran named Adolf Hitler begins his rise to power. Post the Great War, Hitler, deeply embittered by Germany's defeat, decided to turn his frustration into political action. He joined a small political group, the German Workers' Party, which would soon morph into the National Socialist German Workers' Party, more commonly known as the Nazi Party. Hitler was a masterful orator, his charismatic speeches captivating crowds, promising to restore Germany's lost glory, and blaming the country's woes on the Treaty of Versailles and the Jews. His words struck a chord with the German populace, still reeling from the economic and social fallout of the war. Hitler's influence grew, and so did the Nazis' power. By the early 30s, the Nazis had become a major political force. In 1933, President Paul von Hindenburg, under intense pressure, appointed Hitler as the German Chancellor. This was a calculated move by the old guard, thinking they could control Hitler. They couldn't have been more wrong. With his position secured, Hitler and his Nazi government began to consolidate their power, systematically dismantling Germany's democratic institutions. Hitler's ambition knew no bounds. By the following year, after President Hindenburg's death, Hitler abolished the title of president and declared himself Führer, the absolute leader of Germany. In 1934, Hitler declared himself Führer, the absolute leader of Germany, setting the stage for a global conflict unlike any other. Before the Second World War officially began in 1939 with Hitler at the helm, Germany was already flexing its military muscles. In 1938, Hitler orchestrated the annexation of the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia that was home to a large population of ethnic Germans. This act of territorial expansion, justified by Hitler as the protection of German-speaking peoples, was a precursor to the aggressions that would soon plunge the world into war. In an attempt to appease Hitler, Britain and France signed the Munich Agreement, naively believing they could avoid war by permitting Germany's annexation of the Sudetenland. However, this only whetted Hitler's appetite for expansion. He then set his sights on Poland, initiating a global conflict that would reshape the face of history. The world watched as Hitler, fueled by a dangerous mix of ambition and aggression, launched his Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, a military strategy designed for swift, decisive victories. The Polish army, caught off guard and ill-prepared, was unable to withstand the German onslaught. Poland's defeat was a grim harbinger of what was to come. In the midst of this turmoil, Hitler made a pact with Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union. Known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, this non-aggression treaty allowed Hitler to focus his military efforts on Western Europe without fear of Soviet intervention. However, this pact was not to last. With Poland under German control, Hitler turned his attention to France, the Netherlands, Belgium, and ultimately, Britain. The war expanded, engulfing most of Europe in its fiery grasp. As the war raged on, Hitler's forces seemed unstoppable. They advanced with a deadly combination of speed, power, and ruthless efficiency, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. But as we'll see, history is unpredictable. By 1941, Hitler's forces seemed unstoppable, but the tide of the war was about to change. From 1942 onwards, the fortunes of Hitler and the Third Reich began to wane. As the war progressed, strategic errors and the sheer tenacity of the Allies started to turn the tide. One such pivotal moment was the Battle of Stalingrad. The Soviet Union held their ground, repelling the German forces in a brutal winter standoff. This marked the first major defeat of Hitler's military, signifying a shift in momentum. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, D-Day was unfolding. Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy, cracking open the Western Front. This two-pronged assault left Hitler and his forces stretched thin, unable to sustain their early successes. As the noose tightened around Germany, Hitler retreated into his bunker, the Führer bunker, in Berlin. His grand vision of a 1,000-year Reich was crumbling around him. Isolated and desperate, he orchestrated a final act of defiance, the Battle of Berlin. But it was a lost cause. The Allies were closing in. In the spring of 1945, with the fall of Berlin imminent, Hitler made his final decision. Trapped in his bunker, he chose to end his own life, rather than face capture. His suicide marked the end of an era of terror and tyranny, the collapse of the Nazi regime. Hitler's death marked the end of the World War II, a conflict he had initiated, leaving the world in ruins. A haunting reminder of the cost of unchecked ambition and the horrific consequences of war. In the span of 6 years, Adolf Hitler led the world into a war that cost millions of lives. His leadership, while destructive, has undeniably left an indelible mark on global history. Despite the devastation, the world rose from the ashes, vowing to remember the past and prevent such a catastrophe from happening again.